Hello, my name is Vanessa Wiegel, and I founded and currently lead the design research team at iRobot. Designing robots for the home is hard. It involves conducting a lot of challenging research that spans physical hardware, tangible UIs, digital experiences through our mobile app, voice interactions, and smart home automations. However, learning how to successfully navigate this complex environment can be incredibly rewarding as a researcher. Today, I'm excited to speak with you about one of the more challenging forms of research we conduct, global industrial design research. In this talk, you'll learn why conducting global industrial design research is important, particularly when you're designing products for users around the world. You'll learn how to conduct this type of research, during which I'll share the methodology and best practices I've honed over the past 3 years. And you'll learn how this research and these best practices are relevant to you, whether you're conducting research on physical products, in context research, or international research, because global industrial design research is a combination of all three. You'll also learn how our flagship product went from this to this. Notice the gray color, the faux fabric texture, and the more minimalist UI. All of these changes were based on user research, and I'll explain how we got there. Here's a challenge some of you can likely relate to. When you're working for a company that produces products that are sold globally, particularly products that are used and displayed in the home, whether it's a refrigerator, voice assistant, thermostat, or in the case of iRobot, robotic vacuums and mops, where the visual design often matters to users, and unlike working in an agile environment, these design decisions need to be locked in 12 months in advance with less opportunity to iterate. How do you make educated and informed decisions about your product's industrial design? Interior home designs vary. There are cultural factors at play with colors and materials, not to mention diverse personal style preferences. For instance, homes in Tokyo look very different from homes in Dallas. The real estate in Tokyo is very expensive, and therefore the homes tend to be smaller in terms of square footage. Compare that with Dallas, where you find more sprawling properties. And because of that smaller square footage in Tokyo, users there are particularly attentive to and thoughtful about what goes on their floors and what takes up space. The floor types also vary. If you go to Tokyo, it's not uncommon to see tatami mats used as flooring, which are mats woven from rush and cloth. Compare that to the flooring you may find in Dallas, which includes lots of hardwood, tile, and also wall-to-wall carpeting in bedrooms. So how do you design for this? How do you design one product for multiple regions, home types, and personal tastes? CMF research, or research exploring colors, materials, and finishes, is one type of research that can help you make these types of decisions. And I'm going to share an example of this research in action, including my approach, methodology, and recommendations for how you can conduct global industrial design research. In 2019, we were in the process of developing the industrial design story for our next generation of robotic vacuum cleaner, spanning multiple product tiers, from entry-level to premium, and these products were going to be sold globally. Our industrial design team came to me seeking guidance. They had conducted some secondary research on product and interior design trends, and had some hypotheses about what colors, materials, and finishes should be used moving forward. They wanted to understand how these design options would be perceived by users, which would be embraced, rejected, and why. Also, given the form factor for premium, mid-tier, and entry-level products was effectively the same, a round robot with a similar tangible UI, they wanted to understand how they might leverage colors, materials, and finishes to differentiate between the product tiers. We all know with any study, it's important to get aligned with your stakeholders on their goals, hypotheses, and any constraints. In the case of CMF research, it's particularly important to get aligned on any design principles and metrics for success. For instance, we knew from prior research that durability is a key consideration for current and potential users of our products. So understanding what colors, materials, and finishes read as more or less durable would be important. We also had to align on where to conduct the research. We couldn't realistically conduct research in every country where Roomba was sold. So we looked at our key markets, North America, EMEA, and APAC. And within those markets, we selected regions that would ensure a mix of environmental, cultural, and housing type diversity. For instance, in North America, we selected Boston and Dallas. to ensure a mix of climate, architectural, and interior design diversity. And then once we aligned on those geographic regions, we turned our attention to what types of users we wanted to recruit within each region. As you know, recruitment can often make or break your study. In the case of this type of research, it's important to leverage existing best practices and recruitment criteria to ensure you're capturing your target user base. For instance, in our case, we knew what percentage of our users had pets and young kids, and so we sought to represent that in our sample, particularly since having pets and young kids can often impact purchase decisions. We then had to look at the areas in which it was important to have diversity. In our case, this was a diverse mix of interior design styles, home sizes, and floor types. Also, unique to CMF research, it's important to screen for users who care about the visual design of products. And you can do this by asking questions that determine to what degree, if any, product aesthetics and visual design factor into their purchase decisions, looking at the level of importance they place on their interior home design and aesthetics, collecting photos of their homes to verify that their self-reporting aligns with reality. And in our case, we devised the design version of the tech adoption scale, which ensured that we had a mix of design influencers and those who followed the design trends of others. So when it comes to recruitment, think about the factors that are unique to your product. For instance, if you're designing kitchen appliances, it may be important to look for users who have a diverse mix of countertop materials and kitchen interior design styles. When you're conducting global CMF research, or really any research outside of your home country, it's so important to get a good local partner. You'll likely need a moderator who is fluent in the native language of that region, as well as your own native language, a simultaneous translator so that you and any observers can follow along with the session in real time, mod guide and stimuli translation support, and local transportation. Now, I could give an entire talk on best practices for conducting international research, but instead I'll just focus on a few key points. First, take the time to ensure that your moderator fully understands your research goals and priorities, particularly any nuances you're interested in probing on. Second, once you've translated your protocol and stimuli, double check that the questions, terminology, and concepts described still have retained their original intent. For instance, when we translated our mod guide to German, some of the terminology no longer reflected what we intended it to, and so we worked with our moderator, who fully understood our goals, to revise those terms. Last but not least, leverage your moderator and local partner to identify and discuss any cultural nuances that you may have missed during the sessions. For example, when we were conducting research in Japan, a number of participants used the term kawaii to refer to some of the models we shared with them. Now, kawaii in Japanese means cute, but it's a particular type of cute. And in fact, it's not just a term. There's an entire kawaii culture in Japan. It's a way of dressing, a way of shopping. There are cafes devoted to this concept. Hello Kitty is in many ways the embodiment of this term. In fact, you could devote an entire college seminar to understanding the culture of kawaii. And had we not had that conversation with our moderator, we might have brushed off or misinterpreted what the connotations were for our product. Another key component of a CMF study is, of course, the visual stimuli you choose to share. Now, unlike other forms of research where you may be able to share sketches or low-fidelity prototypes, in the case of CMF research, you're specifically asking participants for feedback on the visual design. So that stimuli needs to be high fidelity. This could be digital renderings, it could be samples of colors, materials, and finishes, or in our case, we chose to build full-scale models that showed and illustrated a variety of CMF options. A few tips for designing your visual stimuli. First, decide what format will work best. For instance, physical prototypes will give you a better sense of look and feel, how the prototypes look in situ, and the impact of a user's lighting, decor, and general surroundings. Second, consider building your stimuli in a way that's flexible and modular. For instance, in our case, we designed the prototype such that certain components could be removed and mixed and matched between the models. And this enabled us to foster a co-design activity, which led to a very rich discussion of personal preferences. If you do opt for physical models, carefully consider how you'll be transporting them during the research. In our case, we opted to hand carry them, as any shipping delays would have really upset our research schedule. Take measures to protect your models, so pack them carefully and know that they need to withstand travel on planes, trains, automobiles, you name it. And also plan for wear and tear. So these models are going to be handled by a number of participants. They're going to be packed and repacked a number of times. So plan for that. In our case, we had soft cloths to remove any fingerprints or oils between sessions, but we forgot to pack a repair kit. And so in one session in Munich, we found ourselves running through a grocery store looking for super glue because one aspect of the UI had broken off, and we glued it just in time for the next session. So plan ahead. Now the fun part, the methodology. I'm going to share some of the methods that I've used successfully over the years, but know that you can mix and match these, expand upon them, or even innovate your own. Each of the methods I share will give you something a little bit different. So it's about choosing the right combination to answer your research questions. Here are the methods we used. I'm sure some will look familiar, like interviews, and others perhaps less so, like the collage activity. I'll talk through a few examples. So we had participants take us on a house tour, and this enabled us to better understand their daily lives, their household dynamics, and what products they'd chosen to bring into their homes and why. The collage activity, which we had them complete in advance and then talk through with us during the session, enabled us to understand their ideal interior design style, and then facilitate a conversation around their ideal versus reality. For instance, maybe they've had to make compromises when they had a new baby, or they were concerned about product safety, for instance. The card sort then enabled us to understand what product attributes are most important to them when purchasing a robotic vacuum cleaner. And then we pulled those product attributes into the sorting exercise. For instance, if they said they cared about a product being pet-friendly, we would have them sort the prototypes by being more to less pet-friendly. We engaged them in a co-design activity in which they would mix and match components of the models to design their ideal Roomba. We also had them consider accessories. So like many products, our product comes with accessories, in our case, a charging station. And so it was important that we got feedback on the design of that charging station and have them view their ideal Roomba in combination with that charging station. Then once they'd done that and chosen their ideal selection, we had them go and actually place it where they intended to store the product in their home. This was really important and interesting because sometimes users would actually go back and change their final preference once they saw it in the space. Now, a few additional considerations and tips when you're conducting CMF research internationally. First, it can be incredibly valuable to conduct some secondary research in advance on a country's culture, their history, and this not only enriches your understanding of the cultural context, but it'll also help you avoid any potentially embarrassing social faux pas when you go visit participants. When you're there, strive for cultural immersion. So eat at local restaurants, talk to people, your local partners, etc., about their own personal lives and families. And as part of that cultural immersion, I highly encourage you to go visit local retail shops and see how your product is being marketed and displayed abroad. It's incredibly helpful to see the context in which your product is being sold. When it comes to data collection and analysis, every researcher has their own preferences for how they like to code and analyze data, but I want to share a few tips that I found to be really helpful. First, when you're conducting CMF research, your typical text-based coding sheets aren't going to cut it. I highly encourage you to make your coding sheets visually oriented, including large photos of the different models and stimuli you're sharing that you can easily annotate. So instead of trying to describe what the participant is articulating, you can simply circle that component on the design and annotate it. Capture ample photos of user home environments, including where they would choose to store and place the product. This isn't just helpful for you in your analysis, but it's helpful for your industrial design and marketing teams as well, who may have a tendency to use stock photos of homes that aren't necessarily representative of reality. When it's time to analyze the data, I'm sure many of you are well versed in affinity diagramming, and this approach is very compatible with CMF research data. When you get into the analysis, a few pointers. It's important to define and understand user conceptions of the product attributes and metrics you're measuring against. For instance, your internal definition of what makes a product pet-friendly may not fully align with how participants were actually defining it. I'd also highly recommend that you look for what concepts were most and least polarizing and most and least versatile in a variety of different home types. Doing this will really help you and the team when you have to align on that final single design. So, what did all of this research amount to? Well, we went from a shiny black plastic robot to a gray robot with a faux fabric ring and a more clean and streamlined UI. Now, I can't get into the specific insights that led to this design, but if you're thinking about the product that has to work in a variety of different countries and a variety of different home interior design styles, you may be able to infer why some of these changes took place. And the press, and more importantly, our users, embrace these changes. So what have we learned? Well, I hope you've come away with an understanding that alignment on goals and metrics is key. It's important to understand what attributes you want your product to evoke in order for you to measure those. Recruit strategically and consider unique recruitment criteria, such as ensuring that visual design is something that your participants care about and consider. And then design your stimuli, if you're able to, in a flexible and modular way, such that you can engage in co-design activities. Seek to understand the cultural context and factors at play, paying particular attention to the language and terminology that's being used to describe your product, such as with the kawaii example I mentioned earlier. Know that CMF data is rich, and creating visually oriented coding sheets will aid you with note-taking. Pay particular attention to concepts that are particularly polarizing or versatile, as this will aid you in aligning on that final single design. And lastly, know that conducting CMF research will not only enable you to make data-driven decisions about your product's industrial design, but it will give you a deeper, richer understanding of your users, their needs, their context, and their relationship to your product. I hope this talk has inspired and empowered you to conduct CMF research and given you some broader food for thought on best practices for conducting physical product, contextual, and international research. Thank you.